I'll never forget the night the blizzard tore through Aspen, Colorado, the night my family, the Whitmores, tore me apart. The Whitmore chalet stood like a fortress against the storm, its vast windows framing snow-covered peaks. Outside, the wind howled like a predator circling prey, tearing at the pines. Inside, firelight flickered against stone and glass, illuminating crystal decanters and fur throws, luxury smothering every surface. Yet the warmth of the room did nothing to stop the chill crawling into my bones. I was 24 and thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. They accused me of stealing $10 million from the Whitmore hotel chain, the empire my late mother, Evelyn, had helped build brick by brick, deal by deal. The supposed evidence lay in front of me: forged signatures, doctored bank records, manipulated transfers. Lies on paper, but enough to convince the people I loved most. My father, Gerald Whitmore, once the lion of hospitality, stood rigid near the stone hearth, his grey eyes stripped of warmth. He'd once been a titan, commanding respect with a single look. But tonight, he was a puppet, strings pulled by the woman at his side. Celeste Whitmore, my stepmother, gleamed like ice beside him. Platinum hair swept into a perfect knot, crimson lips curved into a venomous smile. Between her fingers twirled the sapphire pendant that had once belonged to my mother. The pendant I'd clung to as a child, the last piece of her I had. Seeing it glint in Celeste's hands was like watching my mother's memory be strangled before my eyes. "She'll destroy us if she stays," Celeste whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. Her words slithered through the crackle of the fire, sharp enough to slice through the air. "You're no daughter of mine," Gerald thundered, his voice echoing through the great room like a judge's gavel. He grabbed the satchel I had packed, as if they'd known, as if they'd orchestrated this betrayal long before tonight, and flung it into the snow outside. The door stood open for a moment, letting in a gust that made the fire gutter. My bag landed with a muffled thud in a drift, its contents spilling into the icy wind. I wanted to scream, to fight, to tell him the truth. But my voice lodged in my throat like glass. Damien Whitmore, my half-brother, the golden child, sauntered forward. At 27, he wore entitlement like a second skin. His eyes, Celeste's eyes, burned with malice as he grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising, his smirk carved deep into his handsome, hateful face. "Leech," he hissed, dragging me toward the doors. "Get out. You were never one of us." I stumbled as he shoved me onto the icy path, boots slipping, breath torn away by the gale. On the porch, wrapped in sable fur, stood Margot, Celeste's sister, the family's self-proclaimed guardian of omens. Her bony hands clutched a jade talisman, eyes wide with feverish paranoia. "She's a harbinger of ruin," Margot muttered, voice shaking, as though I were some curse come to life. The gate slammed shut behind me, its iron bars clanging like a death knell. The sound rang in my ears, final and merciless. Snow whipped against my face, stinging like needles. I fell to my knees, cheek burning where Celeste had thrown the pendant at me moments before, the sharp edge slicing skin, leaving blood to trickle warm against the cold. Through the storm I crawled, my fingers numb as I dug through the snow for my satchel. My hands closed around the sapphire pendant instead, the only piece of my mother that Celeste hadn't managed to destroy. I clutched it to my chest, my breath fogging in the frigid air, tears freezing before they could fall. My lips trembled, but my voice came out steady, swallowed by the storm. "You'll regret the day you turned your backs on me." The wind roared louder, as if carrying my vow into the mountains themselves. I staggered to my feet, the chalet's golden windows shrinking into the distance, their glow swallowed by the blizzard. Behind those walls, they drank, they sneered, they celebrated their victory. They believed they had erased me, buried me in snow and silence. But I wasn't gone. I was being remade. The blizzard spat me out of Aspen and into Denver like I was nothing more than weathered debris. By the time the bus hissed to a stop on Colfax, my fingers were raw, my cheek still tender where Celeste Whitmore's sapphire had kissed skin to blood, and the Whitmore name felt like a story I'd once read and no longer believed. I found a single room above a pawn shop. The radiator clanged like it was being murdered every hour on the hour. On the wall opposite the narrow bed was a square of darker paint where a picture used to hang, a ghost of domesticity that made the room feel lonelier. I learned the sound of rats in the pipes, the smell of rain when it leaked through the ceiling and into a pot I kept on the dresser. Rent was cash in an envelope, slipped beneath a door with chipped green paint. I tucked my mother's emerald pendant under my collar like a talisman and told myself it was enough. It wasn't. Hunger is a patient teacher. Work found me at the Iron Lantern, a jazz bar that hid its bruises in red neon and cigarette haze. The sign outside crackled IRO_LENT_N on a good night. On a bad one it was just RN and a dark doorway that swallowed the unwary. Inside, the air was buttered with saxophone and stale bourbon. The bar top was scarred, the mirror behind it silvered with age, reflecting a dozen lives that never quite looked you in the eye. They called me new girl for a week. Then they called me Amora. The regulars learned I poured a straight whiskey and a mean old-fashioned, that I didn't flirt for free, and that my smile could cut. I learned shift math. If I saved the first $5 tip and the second, the third could buy a sandwich. If I said no politely 3 times, the 4th time had to be a blade. One Tuesday, a man in a shiny suit with a loosened tie caught my wrist when I set down his drink. His mouth was wet with gin and arrogance. "You're too pretty to be so cold, sweetheart," he said, fingers tightening. Somewhere far away, Damien Whitmore's laugh echoed in the bone of my memory. I met the man's eyes until he blinked. "Touch me again," I said softly, "and you'll leave here with 10 fingers and a lesson, but only one of those is guaranteed." The grip loosened. The lesson stuck. But cash was thin and nights were long, and hunger knocked like a landlord. A regular with a crooked nose and a smirk that never reached his eyes offered easy money. A delivery. No questions. "You look like you can run," he said. I'd made worse bets on better stories. I followed him down the alley where the Iron Lantern's neon bled into puddles. He swung the trunk of a dented sedan and reached. The air changed, a shift I'd learned to respect since the night the gate slammed behind me in Aspen. His hand came up not with a package but with intent. "You're going to do what I say." He reached, and I reached too, for the jagged neck of a bottle at the alley's edge, cool glass slicing my palm as clean as a promise. I slashed. He yelped. Blood stippled the trunk. He lunged. I ran. He cursed. I didn't look back. I folded myself into the shadow between a delivery van and a dumpster and counted breaths until the sky paled. When the dawn finally came, it found me with shaking hands and a new truth stitched into the meat. I could be hunted, but I would not be prey. That night I worked like nothing had happened. It's a skill, pretending. You pour, you wipe, you nod, you disappear. A man at the end stool watched me with a patience that felt less like surveillance and more like recognition. He wore a leather jacket worn smooth at the elbows and a face that had learned both the cost of risk and the price of survival. His cigarette burned down, lit again, burned down. He didn't flirt. He didn't leer. He waited. When the band took 5, he slid his glass toward me. "You've got fire," he said. His voice was low and steady, a baseline under the city's static. Not the kind that burns things down. The kind that keeps a person alive when the world would rather they didn't be. "I have a job," I said, "because deflection is cheaper than hope." He nodded. "Nico Vega," he said, like an answer to a different question. "I used to trade the future until the market ate mine. Now I trade what I can touch. Opportunities. People mispriced by the world." I snorted. "I'm not for sale." His mouth tilted. "I didn't say you were. I said the world mispriced you." I would have walked away, but something in the phrasing tagged the part of my brain that still noticed patterns even when my stomach growled. "What do you want, Nico?" "To teach you how to make numbers bleed," he said. "In your favor." His classroom was a borrowed corner in a co-working space where the lights flickered and the Wi-Fi worked as long as you didn't breathe too hard. We had 2 battered laptops, a plastic plant, and coffee that tasted like penance. I brought the stubbornness. Nico brought a mind built for vectors and volatility. He didn't sell me miracle systems or guru nonsense. He gave me work, white papers highlighted like crime scenes, code snippets, order books, a wall of charts that looked like heart monitors for gods. He taught me how to read candles without superstition, how to smell sentiment in a chat log, how to respect liquidity the way you respect weather, It doesn't care about you, but it will drown you if you pretend it does. We started with dust. Tiny positions. If I lost, I bought the lesson cheap. If I won, I bought time. Nights bled into mornings. My hands stopped shaking. My eyes learned to distinguish noise from signal the way a hunter learns the difference between wind and breath in the brush. Our first real win was ugly before it was beautiful. A microcap coin built by a team with more talent than PR was about to ship something real. The chart looked like a seismograph. I made the case. Nico checked the code. We bought a position sized to our fear. It fell. I swallowed bile and didn't touch the cell. Then, like a dish coming to a proper simmer, it lifted. Doubled. Paused. Tripled. At 3 a.m, the old fluorescent hummed like a benediction. The balance on my screen looked like a dare from a future I had stopped believing in. Nico leaned back, exhaled smoke, and said, "Welcome back, Amora Whitmore." Back. The word caught behind my ribs. Not to Aspen. Not to the Whitmore name. Back to the part of me the blizzard hadn't killed. We formalized out of necessity. The file drawer in the co-working space became an office with a door that locked. The plastic plant became an orchid on a desk of real wood. We signed the paperwork and stamped a name on it that tasted like defiance and math, Sterling Vega Capital. Yes, I kept Sterling in the masthead like a knife I'd repurposed, not theirs, not anymore, mine. Nico Vega ran infrastructure, execution, and risk, the engine room where numbers became wages and wages became either scars or returns. I handled clients, compliance, and narrative, the face that walked into rooms with too much glass and not enough listening and made men in subtle suits stop underestimating me long enough to sign. Momentum is a shy animal. You coax it. You don't chase. A small angel check turned into a family office mandate. A cleanly executed thesis turned into 3 more. We didn't swing for the fences. We put the ball where the fielders weren't. In a year, our returns were a rumor people wanted to believe. In 2, they were a statistic reporters called about. In 3, we were the lean firm a few larger names tried to buy. We smiled and declined. Some empires you sell. Some empires you finish building. On the corner of my desk, the emerald pendant watched. I'd found a jeweler on Larimer who cleaned the blood from its bevel and reset it on a chain that didn't choke. Each morning I fastened it at my throat and remembered every door that had slammed, every window I'd had to pry open with fingernails. I didn't tell Nico the whole plan for a long time. Revenge, when it's your first language, sounds too much like prayer when you say it out loud. But I fed a different animal, patient and quiet. I scraped public records, I pulled filings, I followed shells to shells and found, in the seams, names that kept repeating. Celeste Whitmore and dummy reservations. Damien Whitmore and expedited permits. Margot and signatures that didn't quite match themselves. Every fraud is a pattern wearing makeup. I learned where the mascara ran. The night I finally laid everything on our conference table, the city was blue with winter again. I had 4 binders and a drive the size of a thumbnail that could end dinner parties. Nico didn't move for a long time. Then he stood, came to my side, and set his palm over the green stone at my collarbone like he was swearing on it. "Are we going to court?" he asked. "No," I said. "We're going to Aspen." He didn't ask why. He knew. Because court is slow and private. And what the Whitmores worship is neither justice nor mercy. It's reputation. So I would put truth on a stage and let it sing. Invitations are keys carved in paper. The Sterling Grand Hotel, the flagship, announced Damien Whitmore's engagement like a coronation. Ice sculptures promised, a string quartet imported from Vienna, a guest list that read like a mergers and acquisitions roll call. I needed a way in that wouldn't scream. The vendor list offered it. The AV company hired a subcontractor. The subcontractor owed Nico a favor. The projector didn't care whose story it told, it cared what went into its port. We rehearsed for failure. If security blocked me at the door, Nico would trigger the deck from the booth. If they cut the feed, I'd have hard copies for the press. If they pulled the fire alarm, the first slides would already be photographed. In every branch, truth saw light. The last night in Denver, I stood at the window of our office and watched the city lights frisk the river. Nico came to stand beside me, his reflection steady. "You don't have to do this," he said. "You've already won." "No," I said. "I've survived." "That's not the same." He nodded. "Then we do it clean." "Clean," I agreed, and felt my pulse answer. When I packed, I laid two things side by side on the bedspread, the emerald and the drive. One for memory. One for proof. The road to Aspen unwound under tires the way old stories unwind in the mind, too familiar, too foreign. Pines combed the sky. The mountains rose like verdicts. In the passenger seat, Nico hummed a bar from the Iron Lantern's old sax player, a private talisman. I pressed the pendant to my sternum and let the past knock. I did not open. We crested the final ridge just as the Sterling Grand's facade lit up, a crown of electric gold against the dusk. I thought of the gate that had slammed behind me 5 winters ago, of Gerald Whitmore's eyes gone to stone, of Celeste's smile like a knife wrapped in satin, of Damien's hands, pushing. The valet opened my door and met a woman in a sapphire gown who did not flinch at the cold. I stepped onto marble as if it owed me interest. The chandelier over the entrance swung infinitesimally with the movement of 100 expensive bodies. A quartet stitched the air with strings. Laughter rose and fell like a well-rehearsed lie. I walked into the light. And the room noticed. The Sterling Grand's ballroom shimmered like a cathedral of glass and excess. Ice sculptures rose like sentinels, chandeliers dripped crystal constellations, and champagne flowed in golden towers. Aspen's elite swirled in silks and diamonds, laughter pitched just high enough to carry. I stepped through the double doors in my sapphire gown, every bead catching light like a blade. Heads turned, whispers rippled. Some thought I was a ghost. Others thought I was scandal embodied in skin. All were right. The first face I saw was hers. Celeste Whitmore stood by an ice sculpture shaped like a swan, her crimson gown a wound slashed against the room's elegance. Her champagne flute trembled, not from fear, but fury barely disguised. Platinum hair glinted like wire beneath chandeliers, her smile coiled tight. "What is this disgrace doing here?" she hissed, her words slicing across the marble like broken glass. My pulse hammered, but I smiled. "Good evening to you too, Celeste." The crowd stilled. Conversations fractured. Eyes swung between us like spectators at a duel. Beside her, Gerald Whitmore stood stoic, leaning against his cane, his once lion eyes dulled but not blind. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, the tightness in his jaw said enough. He hadn't forgiven me. Or maybe he hadn't forgiven himself. Then came Damien. He turned from his fiancée's side, a young socialite swaddled in diamonds she hadn't earned. His tuxedo was impeccable, his smirk the same one he'd worn the night he shoved me into the blizzard. Well, he drawled, loud enough to make the guests hush further. "Still clinging to that Whitmore name like it means something? Tell me, sister, come to beg for a seat at the table." The word sister dripped mockery. I lifted my chin, my smile cool, steady. "I don't beg, Damien. I bring gifts." His smirk faltered, a crack, tiny but visible. On the far side of the room, Margot hovered near the champagne towers, her fur stole slipping from bony shoulders. She clutched that ridiculous jade talisman, muttering under her breath like an oracle unraveling. "She's the omen." The omen returned, her eyes darted, fever bright. Laughter faltered. Whispers swelled. The crowd had been starved for spectacle, and I had just served it on silver. Damien recovered first, his grin snapping back in place. "Then let's see it." He beckoned toward me with a flourish, his fiancée giggling nervously at his side. "Show us what you've brought, Amora." The words were meant to mock. He didn't realize he'd just opened the door. I reached into my sapphire clutch, fingers closing around the sleek black drive. My hand didn't tremble. I held it up between 2 fingers, letting the chandelier light glint off its surface. "A gift," I said, my voice carrying, cool and precise. "For your engagement. A presentation. Why not show your guests?" Gasps. Murmurs. A ripple of anticipation, like the moment before a storm breaks. Damien's pride was his blindfold. He grabbed the drive, swaggering toward the AV booth with a grin stretched too tight. "Let's indulge her," he announced. The massive screen behind the string quartet flickered to life. At first, the guests expected a slideshow of childhood photos, perhaps a montage of Damien's curated accomplishments. Instead, line after line of documents filled the screen. Wire transfers. Fake invoices. Reservation logs showing empty rooms booked at premium rates. Celeste's face blanched beneath her crimson lipstick. Whispers sharpened. Glasses stilled mid-air. Another file appeared, scanned documents, financial statements, signatures. Margot's handwriting, unmistakable, mismatched across layers of forgery. The room gasped. Margot clutched her talisman tighter, whispering prayers to no one who'd listen. Then came the emails. Damien's own words projected 20 feet high. Bribe approved. Keep the inspector quiet. Funds wired. The quartet's music faltered and died. The silence was thunderous. I stepped forward, my heels clicking like clock hands. My voice cut through the hush. They accused me of stealing $10 million. They cast me into a blizzard to die. Tonight, you see the truth. It wasn't me. It was them. The ballroom erupted. Gasps. Cries. Chairs scraped. The mighty Whitmore name fractured before their eyes. And this was only the beginning. The ballroom shuddered beneath the weight of silence. The screen glared down at Aspen's elite, not with slides of Damien's smiling fiancé or golden future, but with proof of rot, offshore accounts, forged ledgers, bribery emails. The silence snapped. Lies. Celeste shrieked, her champagne flute slipping from her hand and shattering against marble. The crimson silk of her gown whipped as she lunged forward, pointing at me with a trembling hand. She faked all of it. Don't you see? She's been plotting against us for years. But her voice cracked. Because the evidence wasn't blurry. It wasn't rumor. It was her own handwriting projected 20 feet high, her own wire transfers stamped with dates and banks. Guests recoiled as though the documents might scorch them. Aspen's wealthiest whispered, their diamonds glinting under chandeliers as they muttered words like fraud and indictment. Damien's composure broke. His smirk twisted into rage as he ripped the tablet from the booth, hurling it across the floor. "This is sabotage," he roared, spittle flying. His fiancée stepped back, her jeweled hand dropping from his arm. "Damien," she whispered, horror blooming on her face as another email appeared on the screen, detailing bribes paid in her father's name. Her gasp cut like a blade. Damien lunged at me. Security moved too slowly, his hands almost found my throat. His eyes were feral, his voice a snarl. "You'll regret this, Amora. I'll." 2 guards slammed into him, dragging him down. His curses tore through the room, echoing against crystal and stone. Near the champagne tower, Margot shrieked, clutching her jade talisman to her chest. "The omen," she wailed, collapsing to her knees. "It's the curse come home." Her fur coat spilled around her like a broken crown. And then there was Gerald Whitmore. He sat rigid in his chair near the hearth, his grey eyes glassy with tears. For the first time in years, he looked at me, really looked. His lips parted, his voice thin and trembling. "Amora, I failed you." The words cut deeper than Celeste's sneer, than Damien's shove. Because they sounded like regret. Too late, too shallow, but real. I pulled a photo from my clutch, the corners cracked from years of hiding it close. Me, my father, my mother Evelyn. Before Celeste. Before rot. Before betrayal. I pressed it into his trembling hands. "You chose power over me," I whispered, my voice steady though my throat burned. "Enjoy the ruins." And then the ballroom erupted into chaos. Celeste's scream split the air as FBI jackets flooded through the doors, their voices sharp commands, "Federal agents. Everyone stay where you are." The crowd gasped, pearls clutched, glasses abandoned. Agents seized Celeste, her platinum hair falling loose as she struggled, spitting venom. Damien was hauled up, cuffed, still thrashing like a trapped animal. Margot was carried out on a stretcher, whispering curses into the void. And I walked through the wreckage I had created. Whispers followed me like shadows, horror, awe, fear. My gown trailed behind like a battle flag. And at my throat, the sapphire pendant glinted under chandeliers, no longer a relic of grief, but of triumph. The Whitmores had cast me into a blizzard once. Tonight, I buried them in a storm of truth. The echoes of that night in Aspen clung to me like smoke. Even days later, I could still hear Celeste's scream, Damien's curses, Margot's whispers of doom. I could still see my father's trembling hands clutching the photo, the weight of his empire collapsing around him. But when the dust settled, the Whitmores were gone. Celeste and Damien in custody, their charges splashed across every newspaper headline. Margot confined to a clinic, her mind unraveling. Gerald left alone in his broken house of glass and stone, his silence the loudest punishment of all. And me. I walked out free. Nico was waiting for me in the hotel's lobby, leaning against a marble column, his leather jacket an island of calm amid chaos. His dark eyes caught mine, searching, steady. When I stepped into the light, sapphire pendant glinting at my throat, he smiled, not with triumph, but with relief. "It's done," I whispered. My voice cracked, the weight of years collapsing all at once. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't ask if I regretted it. He simply took my hand, grounding me with a touch that felt like home. "Then let's go," he said softly. "Far away from here." We drove west that night, leaving Aspen's peaks shrinking in the rearview mirror, their jagged silhouettes fading into the dark. Snow gave way to winding highways, mountains unraveling into plains, then forests, then the endless rhythm of the Pacific coast. Days later, we reached a villa in Oregon, perched on cliffs where the ocean pounded the rocks below with relentless force. The sea breeze was sharp with salt, the sky painted in crimson and gold as the sun slid into the horizon. It felt like a new world. The villa was warm, its stone hearth crackling, wood-paneled walls glowing in firelight. For the first time in years, I could breathe without bracing for attack. The pendant at my throat no longer weighed me down, it gleamed lightly, like it too had been set free. I spent my days watching the waves, my nights planning something new. I took the liquidated scraps of the Whitmore empire and built a foundation for at-risk youth, children who had been cast out as I once was. I turned my scars into a torch, my pain into purpose. And through it all, Nico was there. One evening, as the fire warmed the villa and a storm rolled across the sea, he grew restless. He set down his glass of wine, his usual confidence replaced by something vulnerable. His eyes, dark, unwavering, found mine. "I've loved you since that first trade," he confessed, voice low but steady. "Since the moment you fought for survival like your life depended on it." Because it did. "Amora, will you build a life with me?" My throat tightened, but the answer came as easily as breath. "You saw me when I was invisible," I whispered. "Yes." His smile broke wide, unguarded, the smile of a man who'd fought battles of his own and finally won. He pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in forever, I felt safe. Later, we stood on the cliff's edge, the ocean roaring below us, the horizon glowing with the last light of day. His hand was warm in mine, his presence an anchor against the wind. I thought of the Whitmores, Celeste in her prison cell, Damien broken without his power, Margot whispering curses into the void, Gerald whispering regrets into an empty house. Their empire was gone, their names tainted, their shadows fading with each tide. And I realized something. I had spent so long chasing justice, believing it would heal me, believing revenge would fill the hollow they'd left. But standing there with Nico, the sea spray cool against my face, I understood. Justice hadn't healed me. Love had. The Whitmores were ruins. But I was whole. And as the waves crashed in steady rhythm below, I knew this was not the end, it was my beginning.